All right, we having this Trayce Jackson-Davis discussion. Let's roll into this.
Yeah, let's roll with that.
He's ready to get. He's champing at the bit here.
Because I got my people were all in my mentions this morning because I said something about Trayce having a hell of a career, and most people were like, yeah, he's going to be a Hoosier forever. That I had people taking shots at him. So I'm into the theory of Trayce. Let's go.
I'll let you just go right now because you've already got a basis to go with.
Yeah, no. Okay, Maxine's got thoughts. She's
got thoughts, buddy.
She is fired up.
She is fired up.
We've hit the nerve now.
Yeah, no, I mean, just obviously to start, I mean, I think that what's just fascinating to me is that people are going to talk about him that he never did expand his game in terms of stepping outside and whatnot, and obviously,
there's a lot of truth to that.
There is truth to that. And the fact that they only got so far. But I mean, I think what you got to give Trayce eternal credit for was he always made it about what was best for Indiana as opposed to what was best for him. I think that's going to be the thing that stands out is that, he stayed his 4 years and he didn't make his 4 years about making himself an NBA player. He made his 4 years about doing the best to try to make Indiana win. And, had 2 years that were just kind of we were just sort of lost, at the end of it. And the last two, obviously sort of rebuilding under Woodson, getting to a point where, he had a decent, supporting cast. But I mean, like if you compare him to other great players in Indiana history and what they achieved as far as team is concerned, you have to actually look back at the rosters those guys were on, and who else they had, if you're comparing him to Calbert Chaney, you have to remember okay, we had, like Greg Graham, Damon Bailey, I can't even remember all the roster on the top of my head, but
that was a roster. That's like that roster was one like when I was a kid of the Cincinnati Reds. It's just almost immortalized in my head. You had Lawrence Funderburk and Todd Leary and Brian Evans on there mixed in. You still had Jamal Meeks, Eric Anderson, Matt Nover. It's incredible.
Was players on top of players on top of players. I mean,
you couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting a guy that could start.
I mean, even looking back at the teams that I've seen, in the 15 years or whatever that I've been, or 14 years that I've been following this program, that closely, and obviously in the in between, it was just like, all right, I had a connection to them having covered them in the past, and I wasn't really, covering them from 2016 through 2018-19, or 2014 through 2018-19. But you would absolutely take 2013's roster over this one by 1,000 times with Vic and Zeller and Watford and Hulls. But even the Yogi team in 2016 with Farrell and Robert Johnson and Thomas Bryant and Zeisloft and
all had NBA players on. All these teams you're mentioning, all NBA players,
multiple guys, multiple guys. And so even guys that they didn't necessarily have to be studs at the next level, but you had Yogi and Thomas Bryant were NBA players.
Jordan Hulls played a career till he got hired away to go to Indiana. He could still be playing in Europe right now. He was MVP
and going 50, 40, 90 someplace and averaging 12 a game in somewhere in Germany or some other top level country. He would be shooting the lights out someplace. Just only because at some point you got to come home, and he got a coaching job. That's the only reason why he's not a professional today. I mean, they had much better rosters. You look at just again what he was playing with towards the end. I mean, again, you look back and say, okay, well, he had a superstar freshman in Jalen Hood-Schifino, and there's a good chance that he's going to have a long NBA career. There's a good chance he's going to be a top 20 pick. Conservatively, he'll be a top 25 pick in this draft if he comes out, which I think he will. Then and he's going to be a guy who you're going to see play for a long time. And he had Jalen Hood-Schifino as a true freshman. Saw him come a long ways. But after that, is there going to be another pro on this roster? I don't know. Maybe, some of these guys could become that. But, there were players on this team that I thought would be showing signs of that at this point that have not, that are not there. Beginning of the season, we spent a lot of times talking about Tamar Bates and Jordan Geronimo. Jordan Geronimo didn't even play last night. Am I the only one?
That's right. He did not play.
Yeah, because it was just Malik Renew, Caleb Banks and Tamar Bates were the only three that played. We already talked no points, and the only shots came from Tamar Bates, and he put up 7 and didn't convert on any of them.
Yeah, Tamar Bates played almost 20 minutes. He played 19:55. We'll wait for Dustin to reconnect. Malik Renew played almost 10 minutes, right at 10 minutes. Caleb Banks just a little over, just under 3, so he wasn't in there very long. And then there was a comment while we're waiting for Dustin Dopirak to come back from someone that, from Steven says, Gunn must be a terrible practice player for Bates to get the minutes he does. They're not the same, but Banks plays the 3. CJ's a shooting guard, a 2. They do not play the same position, so that's a completely different deal there. And CJ Gunn is going to be a good player for Indiana. I love CJ, but he was not ready for what Miami was throwing last night. But
was that me or was that you guys?
You were saying we were talking about TJD.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it just there were a lot of pieces to this team that you thought were going to be better than they were, and they were not at this point in the year.
Depth. How about depth? Start with depth.
No, I mean there was. I mean, and the thing was, it's not like you looked at this roster at the beginning and said they're going to have no depth. Like
exactly.
There were guys that you look toward and say, okay, like this could be a guy, this could be a guy, this could be a guy.
Geronimo, Tamar Bates.
They were okay. Yeah, like Malik Renew, Geronimo, Tamar Bates, they all had their moments, but there was not enough consistency there. Nearly enough. You know, like if you would have told me at the beginning of the year, like, all right, like Galloway and Kopp are going to start every game, I'd be like, you know, like that would be
right.
That would have been my thought. It's like 2 through. If you had told me 2 through 4 is going to be Galloway, Kopp, and Thompson, and there's not going to be any discussion there, I'd be like, okay, something went wrong.
Well, it did.
Yeah. So, you know, because I thought, okay, like all these guys are chomping at the bit. They're going to, you know, like one of them is going to have a breakthrough, whether it's Renew, whether it's Geronimo, whether it's Bates, you know, whether it's Banks or Gunn, you know, like one of these guys is going to have a breakthrough. And like those Kopp and Galloway are still going to be important pieces, but they're not going to be surefire. They're definitely one of your top 5 guys. If they're 2 of your top 5 guys and you've got, you know, then this is not going as well as it was supposed to. And if you have that on top of X is also out, I've been like, all right, well, this is not going the way that it's supposed to. But one, those 2 guys shot it better than I would have expected. And, you know, Trayce was even better. Trayce was phenomenal. And I think Josefino was even better than you would have thought.
You know, as we kind of talk about this, it makes me wonder, Jim, is it fair to say that Indiana both overachieved and underachieved this season? Because I think when you look at the expectations coming into the season, and then when you look at how poorly there's no other way to put it. The bench was bad, and I understand that there were injuries, but when you look, they obviously had goals of maybe Sweet 16, of winning a Big Ten championship, maybe winning their first Big Ten tournament. They did none of those things. So in that regard, they underachieved considering the talent. But when you look back and reflect on the season, as Dustin just pointed out, when you look at who they had to rely on as their starting rotation, when you figure in the fact that they had absolutely zero help from their bench for most of the season, they dealt with the loss of Xavier Johnson. Race Thompson was injured. Jordan Geronimo was injured. Other guys, you know, TJD at points in the season didn't look like the kind of All-American player that he looked through the last 2 months of the season. Like it's just kind of a weird year. Like I think overall, you look back and you say this was a good Indiana team, but I still think that there's some of that underlying we underachieved this season. But I think that was because of expectations. When you factor everything in, you look back and you say Indiana had a pretty damn good year, all things considered.
Yeah, I mean, I look back and say, like, if you told me in November this is what's going to happen, where would I think it would be? And,
exactly.
And like, for on some of those questions, I'd be like significantly worse because it was like when I was imagining like the peak version of this team, I imagined Tamar Bates as a starter quality player, you know, and like I still like I really want to believe in that kid, like because I just like him. He's a good dude, good family, you know, etc. Like I think he's got nice pieces to his game that I can imagine coming together in a really good package, but it just hasn't happened yet. He just hasn't been consistent enough as a shooter or anything else. I mean, Jordan Geronimo, if you told me Jordan Geronimo would be invisible sometimes, like that would have blown my mind. It was like, okay, like I've seen this dude for 2 years make big plays at big times and have at least a couple games a year where he looks like the best player on the floor. You know, like not consistently, but you have these moments where you're like, okay, he just dunked on somebody's head, swatted, you know, a couple shots into whatever. He's grabbing grown men rebounds. Like that is a dude. Like that is a Big Ten power forward, you know, like almost all league quality player right there. Like when he gets his minutes, he's going to be the guy. And if you told me like you're not even going to play him in the tournament, like you're going to choose not to because he hasn't been effective enough, like I'd been like, okay, well, something went wrong.
Remember the picture, not from very long, Big Ten tournament, I think, where there was a timeout and the team was huddled, but Jordan Geronimo was still sitting there. I'm not going to say sulking, but whatever it was, he was doing something.
I mean, so it's just like, I mean, like, I obviously haven't been around the team like I was, you know, the last couple of years, but it's just like, okay, if you told me that guy's not going to make a leap, you know, and he's going to produce very little, and you know, all these guys that you're like, okay, like if they become dudes, then this team raises its ceiling, and none of those guys really do. You know, like we talked about Geronimo playing a 3 if they could put him and Thompson on the floor at the same time, like that never came close to happening. And so, you know, like none of these things that could have made them another level got there, and yet they still, you know, like won a tournament game, you know, were competitive in the league, beat the Big Ten champs twice handily, you know, with dealing with Purdue. You know, you could have said, you know, you could argue that they were the best team in the Big Ten this year, even though they didn't win it. Like I would have been surprised. So I do think I think they didn't grossly overachieved, but I think ultimately what happened, they achieved at least at their level, if not higher.
This is a great point Ryan makes. Indiana cannot go backwards. They have to maintain.
They're going to go backwards. They're going to go backwards. Like on a whole, like I don't know about how far they get in the tournament. This is a one-shot deal, and if you only judge it, like I don't think they're going to win as many games. I don't know that they're going to compete at the league at the same level. Like they're going to lose Trayce, they're going to lose Race. You know, they're going to lose Cobb. Like,
there's going to be 6 new faces on this team. As
like, unless they just nail the portal, absolutely, you know, hit their portal, you know, like hit their portal additions as hard as they possibly can. Like, they're going to take a step. Like, I'll be really surprised if they don't take a step back on a whole. Again, like, what happens a year from now? Like, we do put too much on, you know, in terms of like judging, you know, how good a team is on this tournament. Like it's wacky and wild for a reason. It's a single elimination tournament. It is nuts by design. And so, you know, we can't act like, oh, well, you know, like obviously this stuff matters. It is the goal, but it's like, all right, like in terms of lessons learned, you can take too much from this because wacky stuff can happen. But I can't imagine them winning more games next year. Like I'll be shocked. I'll be utterly shocked if they put together a team that can do better than this. Because like right now, who's your guy? You know, like if you run this team out right now, like who is the centerpiece? Like who are you running through? Who's your go-to scorer?